this is the abdominal cavity and this is the viscera. So this viscera is connected to this abdominal cavity via the peritoneum fold. Also, one viscera is connected to another viscera. It is connected to another viscera through this peritoneal fold. Okay, so during the development of the gut, there are three types of divisions which is made over here. One is the foregut, the midgut, and the hindgut. So the gut, as such, is foregut, midgut, and hindgut. So the contents which are included under this foregut. So foregut कहाँ से कहाँ तक होता है? तो it is from esophagus, stomach, the upper parts of the duodenum, up to the opening of the bile duct. Fine. Then the midgut, rest of the duodenum, jejunum, ileum, appendix, cecum, and it also includes the 2/3 of the transverse section. Hindgut. Hindgut involves left 1/3 of the transverse colon, the descending colon, sigmoid colon, proximal part of the rectum. Fine. Now ये हो गया gut का formation. Now actually the main concept which is lying over here is what is ventral and what is dorsal mesogastrium. So ventral and dorsal mesogastrium can be understood with the help of this diagram over here. So looking at this diagram, this is the stomach, this is the stomach, this is the liver, and this is the spleen. Okay, ये जो view है this is anterior view and ये जो view है this is posterior view. Now listen carefully. The part which is in front of the liver, the part which is in front of the liver is known as ventral mesogastrium, and the part which is present behind the liver is known as dorsal mesogastrium. It is known as dorsal mesogastrium. This part is known as dorsal mesogastrium. Fine. Now, this further, the ventral and the dorsal is divided now into ventral mesogastrium, ventral dorsal mesogastrium. Then again the dorsal mesogastrium is again divided into the dorsal ventral mesogastrium and the dorsal mesogastrium. So as such there are, see, the ventral mesogastrium is divided into two parts, ventral mesogastrium and ventral dorsal mesogastrium. Again, the dorsal mesogastrium is divided into two parts. One is ventral dorsal mesogastrium and dorsal mesogastrium. Fine. So see in this diagram, over here this is the stomach, this is the liver, and this is the spleen present over here. So the part which is in front of the liver will be what? It will be ventral mesogastrium, and the part which will be behind the liver will be known as the dorsal mesogastrium. So in detail, what is ventral mesogastrium? So ventral mesogastrium divided into two parts. Why? Because of the liver which is present over here. So there is ventral and dorsal part. So this is ventral mesogastrium and dorsal ventral mesogastrium. So the ventral mesogastrium heads up and forms the ligaments of the liver. So the ligaments of the liver are falciform ligament, right and left triangular ligament, superior and inferior layers of the coronary ligament. When the liver would be studied in detail at that part, it will be understood more. Dorsal ventral mesogastrium. Okay, so since now it is present behind the liver and in front of the stomach, So it will be forming what? It will be forming the lesser omentum. So dorsal ventral mesogastrium forms the lesser omentum. Important point. Okay. Then this is about ventral mesogastrium. Now there is a note. The dorsal part of the ventral mesogastrium forms the lesser omentum. The dorsal ventral mesogastrium forms the lesser omentum. So lesser omentum or the omental bursa is formed by what part? So it is formed by the dorsal ventral mesogastrium. Next, what is dorsal mesogastrium? So dorsal mesogastrium, the greater or the caudal part becomes elongated to form the greater omentum. Now spleen forms the cranial part of the dorsal mesogastrium. Now dorsal mesogastrium gets divided because of the spleen. The ventral mesogastrium was dividing because of the liver, but the dorsal mesogastrium is dividing because of the spleen. So again two parts are formed. One is the ventral dorsal mesogastrium, and one is the dorsal mesogastrium. Fine. So the ventral dorsal mesogastrium is actually forming the gastrosplenic ligament. Now what is gastrosplenic ligament? So gastrosplenic ligament. So G is gastric means stomach, and S is spleen. So the one that is connecting the gastric yani ki stomach to the spleen is known as the gastrosplenic ligament, and it is formed by what? It is formed by the ventral dorsal mesogastrium. Next is dorsal mesogastrium. So dorsal mesogastrium, where it lies below the spleen, and it forms what? The lino-renal ligament. This is one of the ligament of the spleen, which will be studied in spleen in detail. Then over here in this diagram we can see this is liver, this is the liver, okay, this is the liver, and this is the stomach. Okay, so the part which is present behind the liver and in front of the stomach will form the dorsal mesogastrium, and the part in front of the liver will form the ventral mesogastrium. So this is the same diagram which is also depicted over here. This one. This is stomach, spleen, liver. So this is ventral mesogastrium. This is dorsal mesogastrium. This is ventral mesogastrium. This is ventral dorsal mesogastrium. Dorsal ventral mesogastrium. Then this is dorsal mesogastrium. So this will be ventral dorsal mesogastrium, and यहाँ पे जो पीछे रहेगा this will be dorsal mesogastrium. Important points to remember over here is that the dorsal ventral mesogastrium forms the lesser omentum, and the ventral dorsal mesogastrium forms the gastrosplenic ligament, and dorsal mesogastrium forms the lino-renal ligament. Now moving forward, what is omentum? Okay, so omentum. Now omentum is basically divided into two parts. One is greater omentum and one is lesser omentum. So what is greater omentum? Greater omentum means it is a large fold of peritoneum. It is a kind of peritoneum, but it is a fold of peritoneum, which is what? Which is suspending a kind of an organ. Hence it is known as fold of peritoneum, as we have studied earlier, that the one that is suspending the viscera through the abdominal cavity or connecting one viscera to the another is done by the peritoneal fold. So greater omentum is also a kind of peritoneal fold. So greater omentum greater omentum is a large fold of peritoneum which hangs down from the greater curvature of the stomach. Now, this is the stomach. This is the stomach, and this is the lesser curvature of the stomach, and this is the greater curvature of the stomach. So, the greater omentum hangs down from the greater curvature of the stomach. Okay, this is important, from the greater curvature of the stomach, like an apron. So, what it does is, when it hangs down from the greater curvature of the stomach, it covers the loops of the intestine, and most importantly, it is made up of 4 layers of peritoneum. All these 4 layers fuse together to form this thin fenestrated membrane. It contains variable quantities of fats and small arteries and veins. This is the stomach, and this are the 4 layers of the of the omentum. So over here, this is the first layer of the omentum, then this is the second layer, this is the third layer, and this is the fourth layer. So all these 4 layers gets fused with one another, and it is written over here, and it forms the fenestrated membrane. So let's look at this diagram. So as you can see, this is the greater curvature. This is the greater curvature. As you can see that this is the greater curvature of the stomach, and from the greater curvature there is hanging down what is known as the greater omentum. As it is written over here, this is the greater omentum, and this is the greater curvature of the stomach. Next, now it is written, the anterior 2 layers, that is first and second, descend from the greater curvature of the stomach to variable extent and fold upon themselves to form the posterior 2 layers, that is second and third layer. So the layer which is formed over here, this one, this first layer and the second layer are the anterior layers, while the third layer and the fourth layer are the posterior layers. So these 2 layers now fuse together in order to form a fenestrated membrane. So the first layer forms the fourth layer, while the second layer forms the third layer. So the first layer forms the fourth layer, and the second layer forms the third layer. The posterior 2 layers, that is third and fourth, then ascends to anterior surface of the head and to the anterior borders of the pancreas. Okay. In its upper part, the fourth layer is partially fused with the anterior surface of the transverse colon and transverse mesocolon. Now, what are the contents of the greater omentum? So the contents of the greater omentum are the right and the left gastroepiploic vessels. Now there are certain vessels which are present over here. The right and the left gastroepiploic vessel anastomose with each other in between the first 2 layers of the greater omentum, little below the greater curvature of the stomach, and this is often laden with fat. So this is the stomach, this is the spleen. Now this particular artery is known as the left epigastric artery, and this one is known as the right epigastric artery. So at the greater omentum, there is a site of anastomosis of the right and the left gastroepiploic arteries. Now, what is the function of greater omentum? So it is the storehouse of the fats. It is known as the storehouse of the fat. It protects the peritoneal cavity against infection, as we have learned about this before also in peritoneum, when understanding of the peritoneum. So there it was known as the policeman of the abdomen. Why it is known as the policeman of the abdomen? Because it contains macrophages, due to which it fight against infection. It can move from its place and have its function over the other areas as well. So over here the functions of the gastroepiploic vessels have been explained. This is collection of macrophages which occurs over here, due to which there is Malsey spots which can be seen, and because of this Malsey spots there we can say that